and just have that as the regular class, because y'all can kind of get a feel for some of the advanced students and kind of the work that they're going to be doing in phase 2. And so we are going to just do that. So we'll have class next Wednesday. We'll have class next Wednesday, but it'll be about crop planting. And there may be a different link than the link that you have now. So Michael and I'll follow up, and you'll get that link by Friday at the latest, okay? But there is still going to be class 6 p.m. next Wednesday. All it does is it throws our schedule just kind of a week off, but we've built in some time and space, so you're not going to be missing anything. In fact, you'll be getting a little bit more than previous classes have received. So just letting you know that's what's up. As we come into the space, any announcements, any appreciations, any celebrations that folks want to share in this moment?
I just have one little comment to share. I don't know if it's really a celebration, although I felt kind of excited about it. I was reading this book about systems view of life, of like really looking at life in a more holistic perspective. And when looking at a problem or a situation, really trying to understand all the circumstances and influencing factors. And in the closing paragraph, it talked about how important it is to change our agricultural systems. And so I just was like, I was going to share just like a little paragraph at some point, it doesn't have to be right now, but just like some of the benefits around switching from chemical large-scale industrial agriculture to organic community-oriented sustainable farming, and how that can contribute significantly to solving 3 of the world's biggest problems. And I was just like, yes, that's what this class is teaching us. And I'm seeing it in a way, and like, you know, once we, tune into a topic, it's kind of like you can see it in the world around. So anyways, it just got me really excited, actually. So maybe it is celebratory to be part of this effort, knowing that the insights that we are learning can contribute to transforming this world. So anyways, I got all hyped.
You're not only learning, you're sharing, right? Because this is a shared learning space. So,
Yeah.
Exchange with you, you exchange with us. And, I will second that. That is a celebratory moment. And it's apropos because, we're going to get into contemplative food systems. I always say, before we begin our cohorts, it's not my job or Michael's job to tell you what to think or how to think. It is to challenge our thinking, right? We had a really robust discussion last week. And I think we're going to have an even more robust discussion this week. A couple of y'all raised the issue. We were talking about world hunger. And Claudia in particular said, well, are we going to talk about the roots of that? And I said, well, you already got ahead of me, my sister, because next week we're going to get into food systems, and there's some pieces on that. And there's some pieces as well around food recovery, and food waste. And what does that mean? What does that look like? And it's really difficult in what I always call our drive-through microwave, society that socializes things and people to be disposable. Y'all better hear what I'm saying. It doesn't just see. We talk about the waste that has to do with the environment and climate change, but the disposable society is not only about what goes into the landfill or what goes into the ocean or the atmosphere. We have codified people and whole communities, and in some cases nations, as disposable. You know, you need to marinate on that for a minute. You know, you need to think about what that means, that in a disposable society. And oftentimes the problem in this anthropomorphic world where both conservatives and liberals try to situate humanity above, right, the evolutionary or the created order, the reality is you are not really situated above. There are some things that humanity can do. There are some things that humanity needs to do. But in reality, when we talk about saving the planet, if it doesn't include saving the people, that's right, then who are you? When we talk about indigenous communities living in existence with the land, that is very different than how we really attempt to even address the issues of climate today. I told you about Joni Seeger and her groundbreaking book that she wrote 30 years ago, Earth Follies. And she said, you know, you need to be careful that you don't slip into the idea of mother's politics. Joni Seeger would say, the earth ain't your mama. You need to be good to the earth. You need to care for the earth. But that doesn't mean that even if you did everything, you know, in a sustainable way, that there's never going to be an earthquake, there's never going to be a volcano, that there's never going to be glaciers. We need to be real about that. And that is part of the respect that we must have for the earth as the only home that we have. So I'll get off my soapbox real quick. Last thing is, tomorrow, if you are available, I have Michael put it in the chat. We have our follow-up. Thankful to our guests tonight, and Michael and Abby, and I don't know if Traver's made it on yet, but from our CFFJ Earth Day Symposium, we're going to be having follow-up sessions every 4 to 6 weeks. First one is tomorrow at 10 a.m. We invite you into that space. I'll have Michael put it in the chat for those of you that never got an invitation or link for this current one. You are more than welcome to be there. Tonight, we're going to be talking about contemplative food systems, but to get started, we want to go back and show you a short video around food systems that was produced by a group of Oakland teenagers. I guess now about 6 or 7 years ago. It's short, but it's impactful, and that'll be a good lead in. Our guest tonight is none other than my friend, my brother, my mentor, Reverend Dr. Morris Henderson. He is the executive director of Seeds for Peace in Richmond, Virginia. Obviously, Michael and Abby and Trevor, they know him well. Dr. Henderson has been a great friend to the Center for Food, Faith, and Justice, a great friend in the area of urban agriculture in general, and did some groundbreaking work years ago and continues to work with us. He's been a partner with us the last several years in our annual Earth Day Symposium, and a noted speaker. We brought him out a couple of years ago, and we did a what we called the Harvesting Justice roundtable, where we had several urban agro folks and organizations, including UCA&R, Stop Waste of Alameda, the Berkeley Ecology Center, and a few others. And he led us in a great roundtable discussion about how do we get community-based organizations and individuals, more in tune with what urban agriculture is all about and what the possibilities are. So we'll talk more about it when we get to him. I'm going to tell you, if this is a long presentation, I want to have another rich discussion. If we don't get to absolutely everything, the slides will be in the chat. So, please pay attention to what's going on. Michael will be putting week to week different articles and assignments. There's a lot of rich stuff that he'll be putting in there. So please just pay attention. This is really for our own edification as we go through the course. So Michael, if you can go back to last week's presentation and cue up that video, and then we'll jump into this week's presentation, but they're very much related. So I want you all to be able to see it.
Are you loving it? Yeah, food justice.
Tell me how you feel.
Yeah, it's a real problem. Is it worth it?
Tell me how you feel.
Food like modern warfare, to hoods everywhere.
Tell me how you feel.
Yeah, are you feeling it or are you feeling sick? Food justice is the topic. Going green so your teeth won't become rotten. But when you got money, you buy a lot of things. Hot chips, now laters, and jelly beans. The things I see become too real. Can't eat, can't sleep, yeah, too real. Diabetes, obesity, real. Diagnosed, now you taking eating pills. I got a baby brother, he eat everything. He cry when he can't get everything. I got a grandmother, she is diabetic, about 57 years old, and still living. Okay, yeah. Small children, big kids, eat right, drink big, going to the store, big caffeine and some chips. High blood pressure, it's a eating gift.
Tell me how you feel.
Yeah, are you loving it? Yeah, food justice.
Tell me how you feel.
Yeah, it's a real problem. Is it worth it?
Tell me how you feel.
Food like modern warfare, to hoods everywhere.
Tell me how you feel.
Yeah, are you feeling it or are you feeling sick?
Dream, something like an ATM machine, I'm a fiend. Healthy living, a youngin' gotta go get his dreams. I ain't letting nothing in the way of that, eradicating every single toxin with a swig of that. I love white bread, but I be gripping grain too. This is something that your body has to train to. Same thing with your brain, it's a game, dude. You can win real easy in this lame food. Now tell me if I'm lying, tell me if I'm false. And if you prove me wrong, then I will dub you boss. Flow so cold, got my mode on delirious. Nah. Watch I flip when I'm in that thing. Sugar cane, straight to the brain. Never been a lame to the food I aim. The food I aim, leave no stain. Never gonna see me walk with a cane. Nah, nah. Never gonna see me walk with a cane. Nah, nah.
Tell me how you feel.
Yeah, are you loving it? Yeah, food justice.
Tell me how you feel.
Yeah, it's a real problem. Is it worth it?
Tell me how you feel.
Food like modern warfare, to hoods everywhere.
Tell me how you feel.
Yeah, are you feeling it or are you feeling sick?
Back to the land, somebody see them fam. 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 Back to the land, somebody see them fam.
Welcome to the Potter's house. We all made of clay, some straight, pull the bottles out. Philip Tingeray, they pushing gate on my travel route to school. Past corner stores and bangers out and lay you out like food.
Tell me how you feel.
Yeah, are you loving it? Yeah, food justice.
Tell me how you feel.
Yeah, it's a real problem. Is it worth it?
Tell me how you feel.
Food like modern warfare, to hoods everywhere.
Tell me how you feel.
Yeah, are you feeling it or are you feeling sick?
Any thoughts, critiques, criticisms, observations?
I thought that was pretty awesome and exciting to see youth rallying for the vegetables and not the fast food. That's so exciting.
Yeah, those young people from Oakland actually produced that, put it together. You know, a lot of times I say that, you know, we don't, you know, we sell teenagers, we sell them short, but the possibilities of what they can do. So I wanted you to see that because I think it's a good lead in to where we're going tonight. Anybody else have any other comments?
It was so creative, so well done. They're really talented.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it's what I liked about it the most is the fact that prevention is better than treatment, and the sooner you start instilling these ideas, and you know, you start the lifestyle of eating right, it's easier to keep up with it throughout your livelihood. And I mean, there's a lot of evidence-based research on how the way we eat when we're younger, and kids that usually like have eating unhealthy eating habits when they're younger, carrying them into adulthood, and it's really hard to break.
Yeah,
So,
very good.
yeah.
Anybody else? All right, Mike. Go ahead, please.
Okay, I was just curious, did they do, like, were they part of a program like this, or were they doing that on their own, or like what inspired them?
They're actually a part of an urban garden.
Oh, cool. Okay.
You know, obviously not the level of theory that we kind of get into, but actual hands in the dirt, and also nutrition education, healthy eating. Yeah, and again, I think that even if you're not an urban gardener, there are ways that you can incorporate urban gardening and food systems education in, because I think it is very true, right? That when you start eating healthier, it's much harder to break those habits. But I don't think that tells the whole story. The real story is that when you talk about like predatory lending with banks, y'all better hear what I'm saying. You ever seen a check cashing center in a wealthy neighborhood or wealthy part of town?
No. Okay. And to continue your thought, I had a thought before that, but I'll flow with your thought. Not only that, what I began to notice is the number of dialysis centers that were popping up. You know, you don't see them in the wealthier communities.
Right.
They're not as noticeable if they are there, but where I live in Oakland, it was like, I'm just having a little sarcasm moment in my brain.
Go ahead.
Just about like churches on every other corner.
Right.
You know, there's dialysis now.
There's dialysis now on every other, and even so you know, in the 80s and early 90s, there was the issue of liquor stores on every corner. Now, even if you don't have liquor stores, the so-called convenience stores, where you might not be able to get hard liquor, you still get, you know, beer and stuff like that at a convenience store. But the real thing is, when they start talking about kids, well, you know, all the snacks, the red hot burrito, the hot chips, those are still available. And so whatever is available, right? You know, we can talk about being healthy and eating healthy, but you know, if you go into a corner store and all you got is $2 and you can get 2 bags of hot chips, you know, for $1.25 and a soda that you don't need and everything, then the reality is, and by the way, they may have a couple of apples and oranges and onions, but they'll be $1 each. They'll be $1 each. And so the real issue, there's a brother who used to teach out at Cal State East Bay, Wazir Johnson, and he used to always say that, you know, the real issue is not about eating choice. This guy was a food scientist and a nutritionist. He said it's really about availability. It's really about availability. You know, if the easy choice in your community, right, again, in this microwave drive-through society, is that you can go to Taco Bell, McDonald's, and you can get $1 cheeseburgers and $1 tacos and $1 sodas and stuff like that. And if so, this is something we're gonna be dealing with all semester. Forget the local Whole Foods, which we know is way overpriced, and most of the folks that we're talking about aren't going to afford it. But the reality is that even at the farmers market, yeah, I know you can use your EBT cards and stuff like that, but farmers markets are not cheap. And I love farmers markets. Don't get me wrong. I love farmers markets. I love the concept, but farmers markets are not cheap. And so the other piece that we'll get into about, you know, food systems is something I said to y'all last week. I said we'll go a little deeper in it. But the thing is when you have to assign a monetary value to everything. Now, here's the reality where I'm about to go in. This isn't about politics. I'm not here to talk to you about, you should be a capitalist or a socialist. That's not what I'm talking about. But I am saying this as someone, who studied economics formally for a long time. Market-driven approaches to anything, and I don't care what anybody else tells you, because I'm saying this with somebody that ain't got a political agenda. The market will decide. How about hear what I'm saying? We wonder why professional athletes and entertainers can get millions and millions of dollars, right? When nurses and teachers are arguing about equitable pay, or service industry workers. Well, the market, no matter what your ethics and politics are, the market will pay for that stuff. That's a sobering reality. When we assign monetary values to goods and services and ideas, okay, that if it is market driven, the law of supply and demand will continue to surface. Economies of scale is what fast food restaurants do. Contrary to popular belief, McDonald's is not a fast food company. Y'all understand that? You know what McDonald's really is, right?
No.
McDonald's is a real estate company. Fast food may be their medium, but McDonald's is not a fast food company. See, we get the game mixed up. Any more than Amazon is delivery service. No, Amazon is a technology company. I'm telling you facts. If you go to corporate training with McDonald's proprietors, McDonald's entrepreneurs, franchisees, McDonald's is a real estate company. Why do you think that people fight over the rights of high-end corners to get their fast food restaurants on? There's a reason why McDonald's puts a premium on giving people opportunities to purchase a franchise along Highway 5 at the rest stops. Those are the most lucrative McDonald's in the state, if not in the country. Food, and everything else in it is the medium to get you in to buy their product. But that's not what's really behind McDonald's and their exploitation. That's only a fraction of who they really are. And one of the things when we think about food systems, what we're going to have to be able to think about is not just the practical, but where are the hands of the marionettes or the puppet behind? It's not just what you see on the surface. Go ahead and cue it up, Mike. Contemplative food system. Go to the next slide. This is a hard graphic. I thought about taking it out, but I want you to be able to really see when you start thinking about the world food system, this really talks about the complexity of all the inputs and outputs of the food system. You can probably see this much closer on your own screens if you enlarge it, but it really talks about agricultural inputs and outputs. It talks about processing, production, politics, impacts on the climate, water cycle and everything, and how this is not a US based system. This is a globalized food system. And if you see the flow chart as it goes so many places, if you really look at it, even if you got better eyes than me, it will give you a headache. And that tells you just how complex the food web and the food system is. Keep going, Mike. So we're going to talk about a few things tonight. What is a food system and how we define them? We're going to talk about the impact of the postmodern food system, some things from the great food advocate, Michael Pollan. We'll kind of build a framework for analysis. We'll consider the self-determination of local and global efforts. And then we'll conclude with how we work towards a more just food system. Next slide. So what is a food system? A food system simply is how we get our food. Food systems includes all the processes involved in feeding people, the growing, the harvesting, the processing, packaging, transportation, marketing, consuming, and disposing of food and packages. It also includes the inputs needed and the outputs generated at each step. The food system operates within and is influenced by social, political, economic, and natural environments. Each step is also dependent on human resources that provide labor, resource, education. The food system is connected to many other areas of life, such as nutrition, food, health, community, economic development, and agriculture. And that is a definition that really comes from Cornell University's cooperative extensions, one of the best cooperative extensions, I think, in the country. They do a lot around food and food systems. How does that make you feel? Does that make you think? Does that jive with how you've been taught or told about food systems? Or are there things that this definition leaves out?
I would say it maybe leaves out indigenous ways of being in relationship with food, and like
Good.
thinking of wild tending.
Good.
It's another.
Really good. Anybody else?
What stood out to me was two parts really. The fact that they mentioned the disposing of food and food packages. And then it went on to talk about the outputs generated at each step. And it just made me think of like all the environmental and climate issues that we're having that are causing a lot of hunger in some, warmer places of the world. Because of just how we are not really taking care of the earth and dumping food everywhere, and animal waste and food waste and that sort of thing. So that's what's
excellent
for that.
Good. Very good. I think you're both are really on time. It does not necessarily talk about indigenous populations and wild tilling. It does not necessarily, talk about that. It does really talk about food waste. And we'll get into that a little more about local food waste as we go forward. Next slide, please. So when we take a snapshot of the global food system, and again, these are not, some just Pastor Michael progressive left-leaning things. This is the Food and Agriculture Organization, right? The FAO of the United Nations. Global food system can be defined as production, processing, and distribution of food throughout the world. Food security for an individual within the global food system is characterized by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations as having the following dimensions: sustainability of food, economic and physical access to food, food distribution to reach a state of nutritional well-being, and the stability of the previous three dimensions over time. However, our current food system is strife with inequalities and issues that prevent adequate food security for all and have consequences for individuals as well as our global environment. Here are the top 5 problems within the global food system. Keep going, Mike. Before we go there, I want to talk about hunger and nutrition. If you really look at UNICEF, right? And UNICEF's real focus or impacts on children. And we really look at what they talk about. And Claudia, you were raising this last week, right? About those causes. So we need to look at the relationship between intergenerational consequences, the short-term consequences, mortality, morbidity, disability, long-term consequences of cognitive development, health, economic productivity, maternal and child undernutrition. And so this is one of the reasons why even in agriculture and agroecology, if we don't focus enough on peasant farmers, in particular women. Women are the biggest group of farmers in the world, and usually they are not farming to make a lot of money. Their biggest goal is to be able to feed their families and feed their communities. And so when we start talking about why hunger is important, you cannot talk about hunger and malnutrition and starvation without focusing on maternal and child health. And then we know, again, the flow chart looks at the inadequate dietary intake. We've been talking about that. Obviously, all types of diseases, household food insecurity, inadequate food, feeding, and care practices, and so on and so forth, okay? So there is a relationship between social and political policies, right, and public policy, the role of farmers, peasant farmers in particular, the role of women with hunger and maternal health and child nutrition when we talk about hunger and even and eventually starvation. Want to pause there to get any thoughts if anybody wants to share.
I would say with all the technology, the problem's just getting worse because of our choice in food. And as more countries want to eat meat, as they want to eat like lamb or beef, and they take over more of the agricultural land just to feed livestock, which is not a real good, food to energy ratio. So and it exacerbates these situations because people who don't have the money to even afford that are they're being pushed out.
Exactly. Any other thoughts? Go ahead, Mike. So when we start talking about the intersectionalities of injustice, this is kind of what Mike's talking about, kind of what that graph talked about. The burden of malnutrition across the globe remains unacceptably high. The vital relationship that exists between nutritional status, human capital, and economics, we can never leave economics out. Malnutrition adversely reflects the physiological and mental capacities of people, and in turn, it hampers productivity levels, making people and nations more susceptible to poverty. So there's almost a symbiotic two-way link that exists between malnutrition and poverty, creating a vicious cycle, right? Each of them essentially fueling the other. Malnutrition produces conditions of poverty by reducing the economic potential, and poverty reinforces malnutrition by increasing risks of food security. Keep going. So the economics of rethinking a broken food system. There was an article a year ago that came out, I think in July, about the impact of how we need to rethink the economics of the food system during the pandemic. And this came from CNN's online business digest, right? And there was a quote in here that it's kind of long, but I just want to really read this to focus this, right? Cracks in the global food systems facade have long been apparent. According to the latest state of food security and nutrition in the world, about 820 people went to bed hungry, and a third of all people lack essential nutrients in 2018. At the same time, 600 million people were categorized as obese, 2 billion overweight because of imbalanced diets, which were also associated with obesity, diabetes, cancer, cardiovascular disease, compromised immune health. Today, immunodepressed and malnutritious people worldwide are suffering disproportionately by the lethal consequences of COVID-19. And they say that there are 4 things that we need to really think about globally, right? How do we have more resilient food supply chains? We saw the breakdown in the food supply chain at the very beginning and even in the middle of COVID. How do we build healthier diets? That's kind of what Mike was talking about. If you have a animal-based protein diet, and that's your primary, and again, don't talk about indigenous populations, because yes, they may have some proteins in their diets, but originally most indigenous populations were more hunter-gatherers. They didn't herd and eat meat the same way. So we need to be honest about that, as its role in a healthy diet before you even get to the processing and the additives. The call for regenerative farming. Farming that really helps to regenerate the earth, that tries and attempts to combat climate change, and make sure that we are living as many of the ancestral practices were in existence with the land, and finally greater efforts towards the conservation of our natural resources. I used to work for a woman that would always say that must also include people, and particularly children, because ultimately the children are the greatest natural resource that we have. Any thoughts?
I guess I'm thinking like just how fundamental the health, the nutrition value of the food is to like every way that a human interacts with this world. It's like in that book that I was reading from in the beginning, when it said that, you know, the organic farming could solve 3 of the biggest problems. One of those listed was the impacts on public health. And it was saying that kind of what you were just saying here, that many chronic diseases, heart disease, stroke, diabetes, and about 40% of cancers are linked to our diet. And then I was also thinking, like, for children in utero, in the womb, when the mother is not healthy, that child starts off their whole life with a foundation that is fundamentally not really capable of supporting them being the best version of themselves in the world. And like, it just seems like it's just so interconnected to just everything else. Anyway, so.
No, that's a great point. And you're absolutely right. And here's the rift in there. You know, when we start talking about the economics, rethinking, you know, the economics of rethinking, right? So even with organic farming, the real issue is until there is true self-determination of people who find themselves in need of controlling their own food system, even organic farming can be monetized in a way which the people that are most vulnerable still don't have access. That's the systemic piece that we've got to still be able to deal with. Because here's the thing, that our farming practices, right? Our farming practice, even if they are healthy for some, even if they become more monetized and alas, more industrialized, right? Big scale, you know, well, the only way the market is going to do any level of organic farming on a big scale is it's got to pay for itself, right? If it don't pay for itself, it ain't gonna be around long. And that's why agroecology focuses on small communities and peasant farmers, because if they are the ones that are producing, there's more opportunity for them and the people in their communities, right, that they're trying to feed to have more control.
I had a thought too. Sorry, I'll just chime in.
Sure.
So as you're talking about all this, and honestly, over the past couple weeks, I've been kind of thinking, and it's so number one, it's sad. Like thinking about all this stuff, it's kind of depressing a little bit, and you feel like, geez, man, what can we do? And then I start just today. The thought came to me as I was thinking about growing up with a single mom, and like we were super poor, and I mean, any money I got, I go to the grocery store and get a bag of chips. Exactly what somebody was saying. I get soda, I get whatever is cheap. And like we were hungry. We didn't have a lot of food, but it really comes down to the breakdown of the family. When you think about it, you know, it's like, okay, my mom's not cooking dinner because she's working all the time.
Yeah.
So we are fending for ourselves, you know, so a lot of these kids in these communities are the same way. When we fostered, you know, a lot of the kids, I mean, I'd go and be like, what'd you guys have for dinner tonight? Dinner, you know, we had a loaf of bread. And so everybody, I'd have like bread and they'd be passing it out. And it was just kind of like, so it's just like this hard thing because even the farmer's market, yeah, it's expensive, but it's like to grow food costs, you know, it's not cheap. So it's this perpetuating thing. And even having my own ranch, I mean, I have a husband, but it's like, I give up sometimes. I'm like, it takes so much work to go and farm and grow this food yourself. Like it takes a community. So what I was thinking about, like, we're part of this nonprofit in Uganda, where what they've done is they create communities, which is the same idea, but it's like, they're like family units, like a village where they'll grow food together and make food together. And it almost seems like it has to be that way when you think about back in the day, sharecropping and things like that, you know, farmers, like they were a village, they were a community, and that's how they were able to do it. Otherwise, I don't see how these children are going to choose to eat healthy foods, get healthy foods made for them. Even like, you know, obese, you know, adults and things like that, not just children, but it's like, it has to do with, I mean, I'll go to my cousin's house, a lot of my family's house, their freezers are stock full of just easy food. And I'm like, what? How could you eat that day in and day out? But that's what they're used to. That's the diet they're used to. So that's the other thing, is there needs to be this education. So anyway, I know that's like so many things I just like spat out, but I had a lot of thoughts as you were.
No, those are great thoughts. And I'll just share this. One of the programs that Michael and I run at Food, Faith, and Justice are well, there are two programs, but they're kind of similar. They're our Seeds of Hope program for our 8 to 10-year-olds, and our Voices Against Violence for our 11 to 17-year-olds, right? So when we have sessions after school with them, we feed the kids. You know, every day when we have a session. And the kids have an opportunity to earn a stipend for their work in the program. And I started to realize about 2 or 3 months into the program, the biggest expense that we had, ironically, wasn't the stipend, it was feeding the kids. And Miss, you already said why. That was for a lot of the kids in the program, that was the only meal that they were going to get all day. That was the only meal they were going to get. And so then you begin to have to question, this is not just simply an issue of nutrition per se. There's also an issue of education. There's an issue of equity. And this is where it is really hard sometimes it can be really depressing. By the same token, you know, when we ask, you know, what can you do? When you ask what we can do, the real issue becomes, you all in some form are doing it. And what we have to be able to do is have more of a collective effort in doing so. And we have to just be mindful of what we're up against. Because unfortunately, the corporate giants who fuel the industrial food system, they're not gonna just go away quietly into the night. That ain't gonna happen. Keep going, Mike. So the impacts of COVID-19, we talked about that in a minute. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time here, but just get your thoughts. What are some things that you observed last year when the supply chain appeared to be broken? How did you see disruptions impacting your community? Maybe have you been personally impacted? What solutions do you think agroecology can offer in the moment? Anybody can jump in.
Well, I'll start off. I don't know if people remember, but at the beginning of COVID, they hadn't really identified who the essential workers were. And I remember on the news and in the stores, you saw it that, so like truck drivers weren't showing up. And so for the first couple of weeks, you know, the stores were pretty much empty until they got their heads straight. Things were clearing off the shelf. Ridiculous things like water and toilet paper. I'm like, I don't even know why people were grabbing water. It wasn't like the water stopped running, but they had, because there was no plan, you know, and they hadn't decided what to do in a crisis where you had a shutdown like that. You know, at first there was a stall, and you saw how fragile our food system was. I remember the news reporter saying stuff like, this could be a disaster if we don't get our trucks running again. We could run out of food within a week in a large urban, you know, culture. You know, it'll be cleared out. And so those things were in place. It was like, but if we had more like local gardens, if we were getting our food from closer sources, that really wouldn't have been a big problem, that we were actually going to run out of food to eat.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'll go, Pastor. So I think for me last year, being pregnant and having all these people running to the store and all that stuff, I was scared. It was like an impact on my life because I didn't want to risk anything as people were dying left and right. So I just felt, how could I, you know, do something at home that will feed my family?
Okay.
And I'm more so of a vegetable person. My husband is a hunter. So I was kind of thinking, look, we can kind of do this in the house because we had some wild game in the freezer. I didn't want that though. So I'm thinking more so for me, I like salad, broccoli, and those are the things that we needed more often, more frequently than, you know, the meats and stuff. So I just thought, hey, this bell pepper here has seeds in it. Let me try this. And as I saw, you know, that was a passion, I just, you know, kept growing different things. So I think, you know, I think, as you know, the last young lady, I'm sorry, I forgot her name, as she was talking about the village and the community, it just makes you start thinking more of how can we help each other? Like, how can we help the community? It kind of went back to that.
Good, Chris. Good. Anybody else?
I had some thoughts, and I kept on thinking, I have a lot of friends that are essential workers that didn't have daycare. And and they didn't have any options on where to leave their kids because most daycares were closed. So, and schools were closed. So they had to figure out how to balance all of that. And I think the interconnectedness of social systems and the food system are very close because one of my friends, majority of her of the food that she had in her home came from like WIC programs and stuff like that, and they had just cut her WIC like a month before COVID happened. And the way the system, the way the system worked here in Minnesota, they decided that you can apply again for another 3 months. And because her job had not laid her off, she couldn't apply. So
Wow.
it just really made me think about how, you know, there's a lot of people that are so dependent on these government programs that say, oh, you know, we'll give you these WIC vouchers, and you go buy this specific brand of milk, this specific brand of cheese, this specific brand. You don't really have options either of, you know, even getting the food that you want to feed your kids, because a lot of times the stores that even accept WIC, depending on where you live, don't have variety. They're usually like corner stores or bodegas, type stuff. So it just really made me think of like how like difficult her situation was, and I thought of everybody, you know, people that I didn't know, and you know, her being, you know, as hard a worker as she is, and just being in a predicament like that where the system just failed because of a pandemic. And yeah, those are the thoughts I had.
Yeah, when you really examine it, when you look at people who are closest to the pain, it begins to make you rethink, because part of the narrative is, oh, well, if people just band together, if they work harder, you know, or they make better choices. And the reality is all those things can factor in, but it's really not as simple as we try to make it out to be, is it? Anybody else want to share?
I was just thinking, reflecting back, and for my family, it became more of going back to like the village, but starting at home first and reaching out to your sisters, your brothers, your mom, your dad, you know, that, and then it branched out because collectively we had all that we needed, but we had to put it together.
Well,
you know, and you know, like, hey, I don't have any tissue, if you will, right? Well, hey, I have some. Can I get, you know, can I borrow some sugar? Can I, whatever, you know, it put us back in that frame of mind to say, collectively, we can support each other and we're going to make it through because we've been here before. So
that's right.
Yeah, that's all I can say.
No, Claudia, here's the thing. We don't want to hear this, but the urbanization of America, and this is especially true for people who've been poor, we have arrived in a place where we don't want to talk about communal living. We really don't want to talk about communal living because we're socialized, right? In everything that we do, we're socialized to think about the individual. And I'm not saying that we have to be stripped of our individuality. I'm not saying that we have to be stripped of our own personal identity. But in reality, the truth of the matter is, you know, if we do not acknowledge our interdependence historically, then I'm not sure what our expectations really are. I think that's a great space. Dr. Henderson, you on?
Yeah. I agree. That's a basis to start from, I believe.
That's the basis we got to start from.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do the next slide, Mike. So this is just a picture real quick. This is in LA. You know, when the food lines were out of control. And this is what the LA Times, a caption from the LA Times, they raised this about a year ago. Is this the new normal? Just let that sit with you for a minute.
Mhm.
Next slide. So real
Okay, so
quick,
I'm sorry, can you go back? What was happening there? Because I didn't.
Those are food
For some-
lines, food distribution lines outside of the old forum in LA. Those are
Oh,
all cars waiting to get food from the food bank.
oh, okay.
They said it went back 3 miles.
Oh, okay, okay.
And
I thought it was, it looked like.
like they go to a concert, huh?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, no, them is food lines. And if you look, there's about 4 lanes of cars going back 3 miles.
Okay, okay. Thank you, because I was trying to figure out what was happening.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Oh.
I'm gonna run through this next section and then I'm gonna let y'all take a break because I want to make sure we have adequate time to get to Dr. Henderson. Go to the next slide, Mike. So Dr. Michael Pollan says that eating is an ecological act. You need to just remember that. How we eat produces different types of ecologies. Go to the next slide. If we look at the history of the postmodern food system, the complex factors and connections shaping food production and consumption. Keep going. The industrial food system realities. We already been talking about this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but this is what I want you to put it in focus. If you look at eating and agriculture, how and what we eat produces different types of agriculture. Michael was talking earlier, if you got a diet that's based on meat or lamb, or animal proteins, there's going to be a very different type of agriculture that's necessary. And so how does that impact species and landscapes? Think about this. In the 1800s, there were far more cattle, far more cattle that were just roaming as opposed to herd. But when we started producing meat and herding for meat, right? So we had to kill wolves because why? Why you need to kill wolves if you're gonna herd cattle?
Wolves eat cows.
Okay, real simple. It's real simple. Real simple. Okay. So let me put it in different context. Let's say you was gonna start a wildlife refuge. Okay. And you're gonna have all these wonderful animals that only live like on the African savannah, and they were gonna be in there, and then all of a sudden, you was gonna introduce a leopard or a lion, and they weren't going to be encamped in a pen by themselves, and you were just gonna let the leopard or the lion roam with all the gazelle and everything else. You probably wouldn't have a wildlife refuge for too long. Okay, so they wiped out wolves. They wiped out wolves to make room to herd cattle. And so the one thing that we need to deal with is with industrial agriculture, whether it's about, herding large amounts of cattle, whether it's about the industrial inputs into the soil, you begin changing the earth's chemistry, right? So, people deny it, but industrial agriculture has a huge impact on the biochemistry of the planet. Next slide. So we need to think about industrial agriculture, right? It is a system grounded, we need to have systems grounded in conventional approaches. Conventional systems typically allow for genetic engineered seeds and the use of glyphosate. Glyphosate is the active ingredient in Roundup. Okay, change happens, but it happens slowly. They're dangerous compounds like atrazine, and central phiotis. They're both banned in Europe, but widely used in the United States still to this day. Keep going. So we need to understand the fragility of agriculture. We've been talking about that all night. Agriculture practices have had diverse adverse effects on the water, soil, and atmosphere, not only because of pollution. We've actually altered the chemistry of the nitrogen and the carbon cycles. The nitrogen cycle, 50% of the nitrogen in the soil and the water today used to actually be in the atmosphere. It was fixed, but it turned into fertilizer to be added to the land. Carbon cycle, 1/3 of the carbon in the atmosphere was actually in the soil. We'll get more into that in subsequent class presentations when we start talking about things like biochar, carbon sequestration, and in. But it was in the soil, not as fossil fuel, but in the form of organic matter, released by and large through the tilling and the fertilizing of soil. This is not just the evolution or the natural progression of agriculture. This is directly linked to how we produce and consume food. Next slide. So just ask this question. Wendell Berry says, how we eat determines how the world gets used. And this is another snapshot of the global food system. I'm going to stop right there. Any questions or concerns before we go to break? And then we're going to come back and I'm going to fast forward because I want Dr. Henderson to get in.
A quick one on the glyphosate. I remember I watched this video about this. I think he's a professor from Berkeley who studies frogs and other creatures of the earth. And he actually had Monsanto sue him because he had released research that of the effects of that particular agent on animals and the potential of really like changing the anatomy of humans as time goes. So it's interesting that that came up.
Yeah, I'm gonna, when we come back, that's a great point. I'm gonna share a quick story when we come back before Dr. Henderson gets in about Roundup and just, how even, public agencies that were supposedly geared towards conservation incorporated. I'll share a quick story about that when we come back. Take a 10-minute break. Let's come back at 20 after, and we're going to jump in and let Dr. Henderson, we'll go fast forward to his piece, and we'll be talking about that. We'll also be talking a little bit about food recovery the last 40 minutes of class. So take 10 minutes. I'll see you in just a sec. Say Roundup story. And for those of you who've heard me say this before, just please forgive me. But when I started working at the Conservation Corps in '93, one of my first projects that I was leading a crew through, we were working in Oakland, in the North Oakland Hills at Lake Temescal. And the East Bay Regional Park District, who was contracting us to doing some work, this was just a little more than a year after the Great East Bay Firestorm of 1991, of October of '91. And there were still a lot of singed coast redwood trees and Monterey pine trees. And it was really still some danger on a lot of the hillsides. And we were gonna have to clear some of the hillsides, bring some of the dead trees down, and then the idea was to begin to plant baby redwoods, to regenerate that forested area. So in that piece, what we ended up doing is found ourselves taking a lot of wood down from the hills, a whole lot. And what we started finding, there were some non-natives that were sprouting up, blue gum eucalyptus in particular, that were the major culprits of the firestorm in the first place. And so the rangers were saying to us that what we needed to be able to do was not only remove where we could, but there was, because the task was so big, what we were going to have to do, we couldn't do it all by hand, too labor intensive, too time consuming. And so what we were told is all we needed to do was just spray some Roundup in certain areas and we'd be fine. And when a couple of people on my team, on the crew, began to question it, we were actually taken off the project, because how dare a bunch of young Corps members and a supervisor who was basically just like a year or so removed from college question the motives of the park district and experienced rangers who had been there for 10 or 15 years. So, that's just kind of the way things go in certain phases, of life. And, unfortunately, the East Bay Regional Park District, and I love the East Bay Regional Park District, but the East Bay Regional Park District, had a reputation of always using sustainable practices, but that wasn't always the case. So very quickly, let me reintroduce Dr. Morris Henderson, who's coming to us, and we're going to be talking to him, and we're going to be talking through some of the solutions. Michael, if you can put the slides back up. Go forward one, keep going, keep going. So I want to stop here for a minute and I'll get to Reverend Henderson. Just think about transitions to a healthy food system. We need to increase the efficiency of industrial conventional practices while reducing consumption of external inputs that may be costly, environmentally damaging, or unfriendly and scarce. We've got to replace industrial and conventional inputs with alternative practices, kind of what we've been talking tonight, that interact benevolently with the environment and do not cause harm to the farm workers or consumers. We need to think about, what that means. To overhaul the fundamental structures and functioning relationships in the agroecosystem so that it functions and a new set of ecological processes will emerge. Keep going. The establishment of direct connections between those who grow food and those who consume food through a culmination of collective efforts. Each of the other 4 strategies for a global food system based on equity, participation, justice is built, and the Earth's life supporting systems are inherently restored and protected. Okay. Go forward. We talk about the Bay Area food system. I'm going to come back there in a minute. Keep going, because I want to get to Morris real quick. Keep going. Keep going. It's all about the Bay Area food system. I'll come back there, when time permits. Keep going. Keep going, because we're talking about food waste. I'm going to come back all there in a little bit. Keep going. Stop. Dr. Henderson. I'm gonna let you take it on and take over.
Oh, you're muted, Dr. Henderson.
Thank you. Thank you. Y'all missed all of that, right? Good.
We're missing everything.
It was a beautiful thing to be with you all again. I'm still tripping on the pictures. That's what I was talking about, Pastor Mike. You always find them, my brother. But thank you all for allowing me to be back with you again. I've been really moved by the conversation that you're having this evening. Pastor Mike, can I start with some real time what's going on right now? When y'all started this evening, you asked about something that you all were meditating on or something like that?
Sure, go ahead.
Today, I have my next door neighbor is getting the tree that is common between our ground, and he had to trim back. And today, I had this strange feeling that it's something went kind of awry inside, because I felt like I had not honored the tree before the tree was starting to get cut down. And I didn't realize my connection until I felt that tree started to, lose. It wasn't coming down, but just being pruned. And you all have made me very conscious tonight of some of the things that we look over in terms of agroecology and the nature and the connectedness of all that we do. So I'm thankful that I had a place to see people that have that kind of consciousness. And thank you all for allowing me to share my little story there. I saw a little fact today, Pastor, that I wanted to also share as I springboard into mine, is this, that I saw a presentation today called Secret Subsidies. Did anyone else aware of something like that was going on at the United States Department of Agriculture? And what I found out, or what they reported, was that this was an effort on the part of rural farmers. They were getting subsidies for having partners that were supposed to be with them in the rural, but some of these people were living in the city, in urban centers, but they were not necessarily participating in any kind of agriculture. And I was just wondering how much of this money that's been put out there that's supposed to be getting to various programs, and especially for those that should be getting into urban agriculture, that's being diverted because of the crookedness and wickedness that just goes on in our government every day. But that's just a thought. I'll leave it right there.
Wow.
We have been called into community. That's what you all are also talking about tonight. And that's how Pastor Mike and I met about 3 years now ago. And back then, my thoughts were, there would come a time when we would want to know where our food came from. And of course, this comes out of my journey in urban agriculture that first started when we had a vision to do a community garden. And we had 3 sections to our garden. It was fruits and vegetables, a botanical garden where we did floral botanicals, and meditation garden, like a Zen garden, if you will, that we have for meditation in the middle. We were in a side of town where it was high risk. You had all the negative demographics that you wanted to talk about, high birth rates, infant mortality, food desert, and high crime. And that Zen garden served to put in our community a piece of tranquility in the midst of all the chaos and confusion of everyday life. So that was kind of like my crown jewel for that. But as we went on into becoming a part of the food system, one of the observations that Pastor Mike made earlier was something also I think we should also give a little attention to, because Pastor Mike, we are put in a situation where when we talk about having farmers markets, it is pretty expensive to have food brought to the market in the urban setting, because of the lack of a great deal of land. So you're not producing at a great rate. So the rate that you do produce does not produce the kind of tonnage or poundage that allows you to get a great deal of profit out of things. So does that hinder the consumption of those fruits and vegetables by the people who need it most? I hope those are the kinds of questions that we are prepared to ask ourselves. Pastor Mike, I have, my position has not changed, but can I say matured since we first met, and how we look at and deal with the topic of community gardens and urban farming. I think we have reached that moment where when I first met you, what you told me about your commitment to your community, that you weren't looking for national exposure. Nevertheless, national exposure has found you, my brother, because of the work that you all are doing. And it stays community centered, it stays community based, and it stays community focused. And the people that you serve each and every day have become not just a testimony and a witness, but it has become that which gives the program meaning and not just an academic pursuit where you can talk about it with your students here in seminary. What you have built there and the system that you all have in place in the class and the agroecology, I believe is a part of a movement that is now going to be centered in our communities, that's going to help us have self-sustained communities, self-contained communities, and provide people with a local food source that is close in proximity to their living situations. So for that, I applaud you. That's how we got together. That's how we are still hooking up. I don't know, probably when they start asking some questions, I could ask some more, but I don't want to over dominate the conversation. So thank you for the time to share that story.
Thanks, Doc. So one of the things that I didn't say to you is that Dr. Henderson, when he started the urban farm that he did he is the former pastor at the 31st Street Baptist Church. He was the first church in the country in an urban setting that actually got a certified USDA farm with a whole farm serial number. And again, he was, obviously in inner city Richmond, Virginia. And, he said the same issues, right? The same issues that we find in places like Berkeley, Oakland, San Francisco. He was dealing with those same issues. And the need for food security, the need for food justice, the need for food sovereignty. And he's too kind. When we hooked up, one of the things that I will tell you that he's not going to tell you is in reality, when COVID hit last year, I was wondering how we were going to continue some of the programs that we had going on. And the reality was, for me, the biggest issue was, how do we keep feeding the community? And there were people internally in the church that were telling us that we had to shut our feeding program, our soup kitchen down, that we were not going to be able to do what we were doing. We're going to have to shut the doors. And along with Dr. Henderson and a couple of family foundations, we were able to not only continue our feeding program for people in need during this COVID-19 onslaught, we actually were able to expand it due to his efforts. So he's being more than kind when he doesn't have to. And the resources that we were able to secure to expand the work that we were doing in the community.
God bless you, man. God bless you.
Questions for Dr. Henderson?
Let me put the program, the initiative that got us together. I forgot to talk about that. Just put it out there. Excuse me. It's called Seeds for Peace. And PEACE, the acronym, stands for Promoting Education, Arts, Culture, Environment. And that's what Pastor Mike adapted that to his program that he had going with his Seeds for Hope. and his Voices for Violence. And that's what we were actually proud to be able to partner with him and trying to support those efforts through the lean times of the COVID. So thank you very much for letting me be part of those as well.
Appreciate you, man. Questions for Dr. Henderson?
Wow, everybody's so curious.
Hi, Dr. Henderson.
Oh, Trayvon. Trayvon, can you see what I got on?
You got a Howard shirt on? That's all I'm interested in.
Can you see me?
Oh, I see that, Bison.
Can you see
Dr.
me
Henderson
now?
and I share a little bit in common.
Oh, yes.
I do have a question though.
Yes, ma'am.
When you started these gardens, what was community engagement like? Like beyond just like the novelty of it, because folks hadn't been exposed to it before, like how did they interact with these projects and what were like the tangible takeaways for them? And like also, have you like, has it been able to continue? Have you noticed it like shift folks' lives in any like small or big ways?
So my efforts started, I started my pastorate in 2008. And we started the farm, the garden in 2009 and 10. By the time we started, the community in which my church was located began a very hard move in gentrification. So the onslaught of people who were not of the community began and overran the southern part of our community, moving towards my church. Now, for all the reasons that was bad, and you might know why it could be bad, it also lend itself to the success of our urban ag program, because all the people that I was growing that food for, hoping that they would, they did get it because we grew that food and put it in our feeding ministry down, in the nutrition center. But for Pastor Mike, what we did and put out there for the community to help those single parents who had kids and all that stuff, they did not consume it because what? They did not know how to cook it. They didn't know how to deal with it. So the way we got that stuff to the people was to the white people who were starting to come around as a result of gentrification in our community.
Did the folks that come in through gentrification, as the ethnicity started changing, as more white folks come in, did they learn some of the cooking methods or some of the familiarity, or did they already bring familiarity with some of the produce that you were growing on site?
Oh, they bought it. They bought it with them. And see, it made me feel so bad because Pastor Mike, I'm from Mississippi, man. If it's one thing folks from down south know how to deal with, it's some cornbread and collard greens.
Yes, sir.
Greens. So we're supposed to know how to deal with that, but that has become a lost art in our culture. The cooking, the culinary skills of knowing how to eat from the earth, how to sustain yourself from the proceeds, the produce of Mother Nature. And we've lost that skill. And honestly, it hurts because once again, we had 2 public housing. We were almost surrounded by public housing. And when I partnered with that hospital I was telling you about, we actually were just talking about getting the transportation so that we could take the food since they weren't coming, they would get it out of the nutrition center, but they weren't getting it out the farmer's market part of it. They weren't buying it out of the soil. So that meant we had to go through an education program, which the hospital helped me with by bringing a caravan in and showing people how to prepare the food that we were growing.
Okay, good. Other questions?
I have a question. I'm looking at the slide here, signs of hope. And I'm wondering, did you elaborate?
Oh, signs of hope?
Not on the signs of hope, but the part about what's stated here, that African-American farmers make up 1% of farmers in the US. And over the past century, African-Americans have lost 12 million acres of farmland. How does that relate to?
So Pastor Mike, we met because I actually had a grant through the United States Department of Agriculture. As he stated, when we got our farm serial number, for about 10 or 15 minutes out of my life, we were the darling of the urban ag program for the USDA. And there I was able to meet people whose names you probably may have heard. If any of y'all heard about John Boyd.
No.
All right. John Boyd is, Mike, get me right on it, but he's the black farmer who has been in the forefront of trying to get the
president,
money
president of black farmers across the United States. Black Farmers Association across the United States. Go ahead.
Yeah, so by the time I'm meeting him, that first line statistic was what we have fallen to from a high. Mike, you might know that. I don't know what the statistics were, but we know that over the past, now we can say century because you're going back just about 1920. But wow, the acreage of land that we have lost over that period of time is astronomical. And the number of black farmers has fallen substantially because, first of all, most of our Black youth have been raised in a scenario to think that agriculture and farming is beneath them.
Right.
That's for their country cousins that ain't got no better sense or education. And that has contributed to the decline in interest and in participation in Blacks in agriculture, period, urban or rural. Then the last one, over the past century, the other lady was named Ebony Alexander. And in her quest to document and then try to rescind the tide of persons, of Black families who are losing land. I can't tell you how we are hemorrhaging land in the Black community, and especially Black farmland, from our families, from our ownership, from our collective economic power base, at a point that my little operation at the church was on 0.85 acre of land. And on 0.85 acre in a city scenario, we were able to have, as I stated earlier, a botanical garden by which we grew enough flowers that I was able to cut our flowers in the sanctuary cost, Pastor Mike.
Yep.
We cut about 1,500 off of that one year over the summertime, over the course of the year. And we fed out of the nutrition center, the people, the homeless and the hungry of the East End, 5 days a week. So we were able to have an operation that was on that little small plot of land. And then, of course, the meditation garden. That's what you see me standing in that picture to your left, that was able to help us help people and serve people as the bottom line. And of course, that's the common ground that Pastor Mike and I found. When I found out how he was trying to help people, I said, well, you got me. You got me. I can go with you from there.
So let me, Claudia, talk about that piece of signs of hope, because again, Dr. Henderson is really humble about a lot of things. Let me tell you where the sign of hope starts to come in. So when he talks about his little program, Dr. Henderson was actually traveling through 11 states and really seeking out African-American emerging farmers and gardeners, community-based, church-based, whatever it was, he was seeking them out. And in seeking them out, one of the things that he was able to do was connect with several organizations and inspire them about getting into urban agriculture on smaller to moderate scales for folks that, as he said, it wasn't just a lot of their kids that thought that agriculture was beneath them. I hate to say this, but even some of the adults, why would you do that? Why would you want to do that? And he was able to engage it again as signs, as real signs of hope to re-engage people that wouldn't ordinarily think of the power and the importance of agriculture to sustaining and building communities. I think that he, not only encouraged people, but he actually provided some resources for people to help them get started.
Wow, thank you, Pastor Mike. I hadn't thought of it like that. Thanks, bro.
And he's going back to places, New Orleans and back to his home in Jackson, Mississippi, and on the West Coast, in Oakland and Berkeley, and on up to Portland and back through Chicago and St. Louis, both, again, urban and rural, as well as his home in Richmond, Virginia. And so I think it is so important that we think about, how do we look at those signs of hope and those people who are helping bringing hope and resources in the community. Other questions?
Thank you for that. That helps me to understand what that's on the screen.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, no, that's good.
How it relates to Dr. Henderson.
Yeah, he ain't gonna say it, Claudia, but I will. I'll tell you.
Because you're spreading the message throughout several states around the importance of going back to the land, as Pastor Mike mentions, building communities and sustaining the communities. And it might not be the present generation that gets it, but the next two may understand and pick up the reins and go with it. That's what I'm getting from the sign of hope. I have more to say, but I won't. We don't have enough time.
No, you hit it. You hit the nail square on the head for me.
No, Claudia, go ahead and share what you want to. It's fine. This is your space, just like everybody else.
Because I'm just reflecting on my own family, actually, where my people are from Louisiana, northern Louisiana. And so there's land back there, but I'm the third generation from where it began with the ownership of that land. And an auntie's beginning to open up about the land. So I'm like, well, I'm supposed to listen now. She's talking. And then I shared it with the generation after me. And there's like real interest coming up there from somewhere. And yeah, it's a lot going on in my head. This is causing me to really analyze the situation and help that connection to occur where those seeds are continually planted and nourished and watered and retained within our Black community, the ownership, Black owned land, and understanding how valuable that is and reconnecting to our roots, which will help us to connect to our spirituality, connect to our wholeness in healing. So I'm done because my head is full. I'm full.
Yeah, and what's so powerful about it as we go forward is this. What I have learned is, starting small, in that micro level might be one of the best ways that we can make it happen, because a lot of times we think about things on a grandiose level, and sometimes it's best just to really think, well, what if we just did something with our family, and maybe not all the acreage, maybe, all we can start on is a half an acre or whatever. And I think that, when people can see possibilities, then, you know, there's the opportunity for growth. And then we start thinking differently about food systems and what food systems are, because a lot of times, and again, you know, I confess, because I've been guilty of it. You know, see, I'm not a intellectual the way that Dr. Henderson is. Okay, so Dr. Henderson, smart cat.
Oh
and,
Lord.
and I'm just I'm just the old ghetto gardener, right? And the reality is, though, I confess that I've fallen into the trap sometimes of operating at academic levels. There's nothing wrong with that, right? To be able to articulate it at academic level, but when we're dealing with the folks, that you're talking about, and Misty and others are talking about, and surely the folks that Michael and I work with in our kids programs, it's like I can talk to them about food systems on a macro level, but at the end of the day, what the kids and the unhoused populations and the folks that's just trying to make it to day, what they really want to know is, how is this going to put food on my table?
Bottom line.
If I'm the mama, and I got a few kids, and okay, what is this doing? If I'm starting a patio garden, or I'm starting a community garden, or a full-scale urban farm, or market garden, how is this going to help me to feed and sustain myself and my children? And sometimes we have to come down to that very basic micro level, not forgetting about the complexities of the food system, but really, this is where relationships really come in. Dr. Henderson and I, but when everything is stripped away, when there's no more CFFJ or Seeds for Peace, Dr. Henderson and I share a vision about self-sustaining communities, and the real seed, okay, is not so much the tomatoes and the collard greens the cucumbers. The real seed is the seed of care, the seed of hope, the seed of love that we got to share. I was laughing with Dr. Henderson the other day about an incident that happened between a couple of church folk that was just as petty as it could be, just folks arguing about the pettiness. And I was really frustrated because I don't like pettiness. And after he let me rant, Dr. Henderson let me rant for about 20 minutes, and he ended it with, "But Michael, you still gotta love him. You still gotta love him." And I think that's and when I say love, I'm not talking about some syrupy serendipitous emotion, but love that's tough enough to stand up to systems and structures that seek to keep people bound in chains of oppression, whether that's in the food system, the justice system, or personal relationships or whatever. And I think that has to be liberating in terms of how we engage people in agroecology.
Amen.
Let me go back, Mike, go back a few slides, because I want to just do a couple of things. I need just 5 minutes. Back. Okay, so y'all asked me to stop here for a minute. Stop there, right there. As Dr. Henderson was talking, I asked the question, his movement, Seeds for Peace, what movements are you associated with, right? And how are your associations working in such a way that is helping your community or helping yourself move the pendulum of agroecology? Those two pictures in the corner, in the upper left-hand corner, young woman that worked in our Seeds of Hope program, and they are actually preparing a some vegetarian, vegan wraps that they have created with stuff that they either picked from our garden or received from recovered food that we had donated into our soup kitchen. That was actually at the conference that we had that Dr. Henderson spoke at a couple of years ago. In the bottom corner, those are some of our kids from our Voices Against Violence, our Voices Against Violence program, and the master food preservers associated with UC Co-op Extension, UC A&R. They had come down and they were doing a workshop with our kids about making strawberry preserves. And it's so funny. Some of these kids, try to be really hard, and they came in one Friday, for an afternoon session, and I told them that there was a surprise, and these grandmotherly types had come in and said they were going to teach them to make strawberry preserves. And these guys were like frowning and slouching in their chairs and looking like, man, we ain't doing this. And then women got them and started teaching them and started having them stir that fruit and make those preserves. And it was like one of the best workshops we ever had last year, right? And they were so excited. They were running home telling their moms and their sisters and brothers, and just feeling like they had really accomplished something. In the other bottom hand corner, there's the People's Grocery. People's Grocery, a great movement that really looks at food systems. Dana Harvey, who was a great food activist in West Oakland, was one of the founders and architects of it. And she's just really powerful about how do we engage people from the community in not just the production and the distribution. The reality is that this is what revolutionary and self-determined food system and food sovereignty looks like. And then at the top corner, several of our colleagues, urban gardeners from a couple of different programs that were just standing up. I'll talk about that more probably next week. Keep going, Mike. So let's talk about food waste. Food waste is a rising problem throughout the United States and even in the Bay Area. This slide talks about the amounts of food wasted. This is actually from 2 years ago. And so it's even increased. The amounts of food that are wasted in the 7 or 9 Bay Area counties, what it looks like, and what the region has to be able to do. So when we talk about food systems, I said this last week and somebody asked the question, we cannot talk about food system change without talking about how do we use food waste. At Center for Food, Faith, and Justice, one of the things we do, we have a small grant from Alameda County Stop Waste that deals with a program called Reduce, Recover, and Restore. Reducing the amount of food waste, recovering potentially wasted food, not only from the food bank, but places like the Berkeley Food Network, recovering from places as well, like local grocery stores and urban farms that are just going to compost. If some of that food is not necessarily ready to be composted, it's still really good food that can be produced on food lines. It can be distributed or redistributed to people and families in need. And then how do we recover? The recovery and restoration is about not just restoring food, but is about restoring community. And that's kind of where we are. Next slide. Each year in Alameda County, 72 to 150 million pounds of wasted, and there's needed 113 million pounds. We recover 6 million pounds, but the new mandate means the county needs to be recovering 17 million pounds, which means it needs to increase by at least 4 million pounds over the next few years. And then there is a new There's a new bill that's coming. Next slide. We need to look at this new food systems bill. The new state law Senate Bill 1383 is going to require a doubling or tripling of current prevention and recovery efforts by 2025. I actually was on one of the calls that's been led by Stop Waste, and there are groups that are mobilizing, trying to figure out how we can make this happen, how this can be productive and be sustainable at the same time. Next slide. So in there, Stop Waste says to support edible food recovery, we need to look at, countywide ordinances for enforcement to really make producers, grocers, and everybody else to make them engage and move towards Bill 1383. How do we partner with environmental health and the Alameda County Food Recovery Network? How do we look at edible food recovery capacity planning? Because if we can't really plan for what we're doing, it's probably not going to happen, right? And a list of food recovery organizations and services and tiers, right? And how, we look at who generates food, who collects, who expands. How do we offer grants to expand the capacity and the infrastructure for community-based organizations? How do we assist with education, outreach, technical assistance, and develop templates, education, contracts, and accurate record keeping so we can see what is going into the landfill and what isn't going into the landfill? How do we engage our partners, local cities, and others in this effort? Next slide. So this, and where I'm going to end, but it surrounds this issue around the political economy of food. What does that really look like? What does that really look like? What is the political economy of food? And I hate to, again, continue to try to monetize everything, but we have to continue to take it back to the issues of how economics as well impacts our food system. I'm going to stop there for any final thoughts or final questions.
I know we're running out of time, but I wanted to say thanks to Dr. Henderson for coming and convening with us. I actually had a question. I hope you do come back again.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I found your slide very interesting about how much African Americans have lost land. I mean, from the 20s, but really going back to Reconstruction is really when this problem really started. And I'd like to talk more with you when you do come back about the concept of heirs property and how it is contributing to how much land we're losing. It kind of piqued my interest from what Claudia mentioned about her with her family, and I've watched a lot of videos and read quite a bit on this, and just the implications and just understanding what people like you, leaders in the movement, are doing to kind of succumb to kind of limit the amount of loss that's coming through from from how horrific it is, the hemorrhaging of land from Black people.
I concur.
Dr. Henderson will surely be back. Trust me.
He'll thank you all. Well, I'll say this on the way out, and Pastor Mike can amen this. If in pastoring, the one thing that I found that would tear a family up faster than anything I've seen is death and people having to deal with air property and how they're going to handle land that nobody wants to live on anymore and nobody sees the value in. And sometimes we have to minister to situations like that when families are really just tearing at each other's throat rather than having a plan of action prior to that time getting there. Sister Claudia, I appreciate your, hopefully sometimes you can get that information that you're looking for, because I hate to see, and then in the end, what happens is the family ends up losing the land. It's not even like they're getting money from it. He just end up not doing the right thing. Taxes aren't paid or whatever. And the state ends up with it. So we need to really look very carefully. That's a very good question. That's Miss Lucy. Thank you for that. Thank you very much.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, Miss Lucy and Miss Claudia. I see you over there. Thank you.
Any final thoughts, y'all? All right, if there are none, we'll see you next week. And again, we're going to be having our cohort 1 phase 2 piece, and you'll get to see kind of what a few of those students are doing and kind of what we're doing around talking about the next level. And we'll be talking about intercropping and excuse me, crop planting is what we're going to be talking about next week.
Thank you.
Hey, Michael, could you say more about what's happening on